In this video, we will have an overview of concepts that are key to understanding acid-base balance. Our proper physiologic function depends on a tight balance between the concentrations of acids and bases in the blood. And so we measure this acid-base balance with the pH scale. Where 0 is most acidic, this would be something like gastric juices, tomato juice, and urine are all acidic substances, all the way up to 14, which is most alkaline or basic. Basic or alkaline items are things like bleach, hand soap, and human blood is a little bit basic. Water is very neutral, and that is at a pH of 7. So human blood normal values should maintain a pH between 7.35 and 7.45. An acid is defined as a compound that can dissociate and release hydrogen ion. An example would be hydrochloric acid, which can dissociate into hydrogen ion and chloride. And so the more hydrogen ion you have, the lower that pH, the more acidic you are. A base, however, is a compound that can accept or combine with hydrogen ion. So for example, bicarbonate, which is an important base in the body, combines with hydrogen ion and makes carbonic acid. And so more carbonic acid is going to increase our pH. pH is regulated by our chemical buffer systems, by our lungs, and by our kidneys. Let's look at the two types of acids that we have in the body. So the first is our volatile acid, and this is carbonic acid. This is produced from carbon dioxide, and it stays in equilibrium with dissolved carbon dioxide. The reason this is important is that this volatile acid can be regulated at the level of the lungs. So carbon dioxide leaves the body through the lungs. And so it's important to remember that unlike our other acids, carbonic acid and carbon dioxide contributes to pH and is regulated by the lungs. The other acids they call non-volatile or fixed. And these are not eliminated by the lungs, and so will need to be eliminated through other systems like the kidneys. This includes lactic acid that we get through energy metabolism, hydrochloric acid that's part of our digestive system, and keto acids, which in small amounts can be beneficial by providing a source of energy for the brain. Our body is constantly making acids as we metabolize throughout the day. And so because of this, we need to regulate our pH. And so we have three general mechanisms of pH regulation. We have our chemical buffer systems that are in our body fluids. These are the fastest response, and these buffers combine with excess acids and bases so that we don't have large swings in pH when we do have metabolic acids released into the blood. Our lungs have a pretty fast response. Within a few minutes, we can begin to have control of carbon dioxide elimination. Carbon dioxide, remember, is an acid, and so changes in carbon dioxide can change our pH. And then our slower response are the kidneys, and they can both eliminate hydrogen ion or reabsorb or generate bicarbonate, which is our base. So the buffer systems in our body are extremely efficient, and it can take only seconds for chemical buffers to make adjustments to our pH. Our principal extracellular fluid buffer is bicarbonate. Bicarbonate can be in the form of a weak acid or a weak base. And so weak acids and weak bases can capture free ions and prevent significant changes in pH. We also have our transcellular hydrogen-potassium exchange system. And so hydrogen and potassium can move freely between that intracellular and extracellular fluid. So for example, let's say you have excess hydrogen ion and the pH is a bit acidic. that hydrogen ion can then be pulled into the cell. And because everything in the cells in the body is a barter system, and you have to exchange something, nothing is for free. When you pull that hydrogen ion into the cell, you can then exchange it for potassium and put that into the blood, and that will then move that pH back up towards the normal range. But remember, when this happens, it can put excess potassium into the blood at the same time. Nearly all proteins can function as buffers, and they make up the largest buffer system in the body. Remember that proteins are made up of amino acids, which contain positively charged amino groups and negatively charged carboxyl groups. So these charged regions of the molecules combine hydrogen and hydroxyl ions and function as buffer. And so they're considered amphoteric because they can function as either an acid or a base. Buffering by proteins is about 2/3 of the buffering power of the blood and inside our cells. And the largest numbers of proteins that provide this buffer are albumin and our plasma globulins. And then finally, bone can serve as a buffer. Hydrogen ion can be exchanged for sodium and for potassium. And when you break down bone, that releases sodium bicarbonate and calcium bicarbonate, which can also serve as a buffer. Our respiratory control mechanisms can respond within minutes, and this occurs through changes in ventilation. So with an increase in ventilation, there is an increase in the elimination of carbon dioxide. So you're blowing off more carbon dioxide when you hyperventilate. So in the case of acidosis, there's a decrease in pH, which is understood through our chemoreceptors in the brain and arteries. This will then signal an increase in respiratory rate. You blow off more carbon dioxide, and you increase that pH and try to return back to that homeostatic 7.35 to 7.45. However, if someone has prolonged hyperventilation, they do have the potential to lose too much carbon dioxide, and that could cause an alkalosis. With decreased ventilation, the opposite occurs. You're going to decrease that carbon dioxide elimination. You're going to hold on to carbon dioxide. So in the case of alkalosis, those same chemoreceptors will then signal a decrease in respiratory rate. This is going to hold on to more carbon dioxide and decrease that pH because you're adding more acid to the blood, and start to bring that pH back to that normal range. However, in cases of hypoventilation, so this could occur with things like head trauma, a narcotic overdose, or a lung disorder that prevents gas exchange, like COPD, here you're going to retain too much CO2. And when you hold on to too much CO2, that could cause an acidosis. And then finally, we'll talk about our renal control mechanisms. The first, we'll look at our renal exchange systems. So one is the hydrogen bicarbonate exchange system. So bicarbonate is found in the filtrate, and they are key to this buffer system. But the cells in our tubule are not permeable to bicarbonate ions. So what happens is sodium ions are reabsorbed from the filtrate in exchange for hydrogen by this mechanism in the cells of the renal tubule. So you can see we're going to exchange sodium for hydrogen. These cells will then produce bicarbonate ions that can then be moved over into the peritubular capillaries, which is our extracellular fluid. When there's carbon dioxide, this can then cause the formation of carbonic acid, which dissociates to create bicarbonate ion and hydrogen ion. This bicarbonate ion then passes into the peritubular capillaries and returns to the blood, while the hydrogen ion is secreted into the filtrate, where it can then be removed in the urine. Another mechanism is the hydrogen potassium exchange system. This works very much like the transcellular exchange system. But here, when there's acidosis, you're going to eliminate more hydrogen ion in the urine and hold on to potassium. Where when you have alkalosis, you're going to hold on to hydrogen ion in the blood and decrease potassium levels by eliminating it through the urine. And then you can also exchange bicarbonate for chloride at the level of the kidneys. Another way the kidneys control pH is through generating new bicarbonate, and this happens through the ammonia buffer system. And then finally at the kidneys, we also have a phosphate buffer system that helps regulate pH. And that is our overview of acid-base balance.